Welcome to Oxford Analytica's weekly outlook on the global political economy. I'm Tom Wales, Deputy Director of Analysis, and I'm joined by Dr. Joe Ford, who runs OA's Africa desk. We have a number of issues to discuss, and actually one of them is not Greece. So you will be relieved to learn that Euro doom is off the agenda. Instead, we're looking at planetary problems, or more to do with environment and sustainability. That is the main topics at the Rio+20 summit. 20 years after the original Earth Day summit, global leaders, or at least a few of them, are reconvening in Rio de Janeiro to discuss green growth and sustainability. I'm here with Joe. Now, Joe, I think the sort of general consensus among analysts is that the conference is almost certain to be a bit of a dud. Why is that? Why are we so pessimistic at the moment about the outcome in terms of multilateral solutions to these problems of environmental protection and sustainability?
Well, thanks, Tom. That is the consensus, and I think the consensus is right. Well, one of the telling features, I suppose, comes when one looks at the heads of state that have chosen to attend the Rio summit. Barack Obama's not there, Angela Merkel's not there, David Cameron's not going to be there. So that does tend to tell you that although there's a lot of focus on green growth and a lot of focus on the climate and environment, it's the economic climate which is really taking centre stage at the moment. And although there has been moves in the first 2 decades since the 1992 summit to try and put sustainability and development on a sort of even footing and not as a zero-sum game or a necessary trade-off, that underlying inherent tension between the sort of needs of developing countries and the fast growth that they seek and issues around the protection of the environment and the climate haven't gone away. And the prevailing current sort of economic gloom has really put a dampen, I suppose, on the sorts of energies that government are devoting to this issue at the moment.
Now, prior to the Rio Earth Summit, there are also actually a bunch of corporate leaders, something like 6,000 people are convening in a corporate sustainability summit ahead of the Leaders Summit. Are we more optimistic about what exactly they can accomplish? What's their agenda?
Sure. There's a lot more dynamism, I suppose, that one can perceive from the corporate actors involved in the forum ahead of the summit itself. One of the things that's interesting, of course, is over time the relative sort of level of attendance and profile that business has at these sort of multilateral events. And that, I suppose, ties into what one might discern as a whole lot of questions arising during an age of austerity, if that's what indeed we're in, about the differing roles and expectations of the public sector versus the private sector in delivering these sorts of social and public goods. Having said a second ago that the overall economic climate has removed some of the incentives for government attention to these issues, there's one exception to that which will continue to feed into the urgency, the sense of somewhat urgency attending these issues, which is, especially after 2011, what we saw in North Africa and the Middle East, the understanding that these underlying social development issues are critical to stability and political stability, which of course gets everyone's attention. From the corporate perspective, apart from corporates, for reasons of enlightenment or virtue, many of them, the largest global corporations, they get these issues from their own self-interest, their economic self-interest, their corporate self-interest in terms of reputation, in terms of supply chain sustainability, in terms of creating peaceful and prosperous markets. And so what we might see really is the sort of private sector not really waiting around for the governments to show the lead, but really taking those sort of steps themselves. I mean, recently, if one needed an illustration of all this, was the first privately funded mission to space. So if that doesn't tell you something about sort of slightly changing balance between what the private sector and the public sector are leading on these sorts of issues. So the forum is likely to really focus on strategies to scale up corporate contributions to sustainable development issues.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back next week. I somehow suspect that we're going to be talking about European issues instead of the Rio summit. It also sounds like the corporate side may actually be more interesting this time than the heads of state and government summit. Thank you again for joining us.